Hey good people, Batavia here. Welcome back to my Chicago garden. Right now we're in the backyard garden. We're also going to take a venture into the front yard garden. But today and this week is about really managing both my summer plants, but then actually planting out some things for fall. We're going to talk about kind of some of the things we're sowing now versus later, and then we're going to harvest some things, including it's time. So this kale is going to come with me into the kitchen today, and we're actually going to dig up the first of this season's potatoes. All right, let's dig in. So it's surprising that this kale is even doing as well as it is, because it is, and there we have it. So now, just hand picking and smashing. So now the space needs to be put on the watch list, because my intention would be to add some more soil. You can see soil line is dropped. I believe it was about here at the beginning of the season. I'll link the video for when I set up the Vego garden bed, but I use a take on the hugelkultur method, which means that there's a lot of kind of filler material breaking down at the bottom, which is allowing the soil line to continue to drop. There she is. So 3 spaces in the backyard, plus a few containers that we'll have here for fall. So this space should clear up a bit. Pull a few more of these onions, and so we can see more have that bent neck, which means they're ready to be pulled out and cured, so I can enjoy them in the fall going into winter. We're going to do a combination of transplanting and direct sowing. So transplanting, I have some perpetual, I want to say spinach, but it's perpetual chard, and it's said to taste more similar to spinach, and advise that it's nice for spring and summer planting. So first time growing it, I have the transplants that have been hardening off, so we're going to transplant those in, but we're also going to do some direct sowing of lettuce. A little early, it could still be too high, but we'll see. And then finally we'll do some beets in this space again. I'm going to come in this bed and do some beets. I'm going to try a shorter day carrot, and in part it's I want to make sure that as the weather gets into fall going into winter, I have another round of carrots coming out of the garden, but it's also to see how well they will do sowing them basically in mid-August. Not concerned about it being too hot for them to actually take. I mean, that's something I have to manage against, because they don't like to germinate when the soil is dry, and with this hot weather, that's typically what you get. But I'm more concerned about the actual development of the carrot and the time that we have left. Carrots will stay in the garden past the first frost. However, they really need to be established. There's not much growing that's going to happen after that. My first frost is approximately November the 1st. So I have roughly, it's not 30, 60, 75 days-ish for them to produce. And I've never grown a carrot in 75 days. So again, it's an experiment. If nothing else, we'll probably have some carrot leaves, some carrot tops. So we'll do that. We'll do more brassicas here. Now, not necessarily recommended, right? We had them growing all spring into the summer, but we want to make sure that I take advantage of this space, because this is going to be it for brassicas for quite a while. So next year, the plan right now as I speak is for tomatoes to return to this space. I kind of have the structure that I can set up for it to give them the room they need and then protect them against the squirrels. So here is the best collard green we've seen this season. This is a top bunch that we direct sowed after the original planted collards went in, after we sowed those seeds all the way going back to March. So we pulled those plants last week because they had just struggled all season, which isn't normal for my area, but that's what happened this year. In this space, we'll do a mixture of cold crops, including just a couple broccoli, just a couple cauliflower. These are things that we expect to harvest as a single harvest crop. And I'm going to do 1 or 2 kale plants. And so basically one row will be things we expect to go all the way past the freezing, all the way past the point of, you know, super cold weather. Collards and kale are super hardy. And then we're going to do some things that are pretty cold tolerant, like your broccolis and your cauliflowers, but we expect those to be pulled out of the garden at some point once they produce their head. I'm going to try 1 or 2 cabbage plants, direct sowing them. Everything that I've read has really said transplant cabbage plants from my area this time of year for fall, but we're going to go with a smaller head variety, Tiara, first time I be growing it, and we're going to see if we can get this timing right. So we'll give that a try. And so this bed will be fully sown coming into this week. And then for this space, I think I'm going to direct sow just a couple more things. The beets and the celery that we transplanted. Beets we direct sowed, celery we transplanted. It looks really good. It's doing well. The cage baby, our tomatoes, are showing some early signs of sickness. So I'm keeping an eye on that. And, you know, it's a struggle each year. My tomatoes are weeks behind this year. So I just want to see if these plants can stay healthy, if I can help them until we actually get ripe tomatoes. So we have some nice size on some of these. And so I may have to make some hard choices when it comes to what to do with some of these plants. But the intention for this space has been, for most of the season, for it to just be a summer planting. We do have the vision. It's come to fruition. The sunflowers here. So, yeah, we're gonna let them grow as long as they grow. I actually have a few more sunflowers that I started indoors that have been outside for a while. I'm going to give the summer squash plant, I did a little bit of pruning because all of my shimmying damaged some leaves, but we're going to give them until the end of August to see if they're still producing. Otherwise, we'll come back in with the fall planting. And then I'm going to start over, I think, with this collard green plants. There are 2 of them in here. I've actually seen some powdery mildew, which I'm pretty sure that's what that is, which I've seen probably just one other time growing collards. Not common for me in my space. But the other plants that are in this particular container zone will live their life, I think. Excuse me while I shimmy. For the rest of the season in this space, this tomato plant. And someone commented asking about leaf curl, which is generally a sign of stress for the plant. This plant has been really doing well, but it has continued to experience leaf curl. All in all, the plant is generally pretty healthy, and it's just stress, you know. So it's been hotter than normal. I've done a pretty good job at keeping up on the watering, but it's a lot for the plant. So I will do small heads of lettuce in this space. I've done that and it's done really well. And then the sweet potatoes won't be harvested until probably well into October. So I won't replant that space again. I'm just kind of fine-tuning what I plan to put in the space for next year. I am going to actually make a decision. I had already set it up to do more green peas for the fall. Playing around with the timing for those, and so you can see I have my trellising here, which the sweet potato vines may end up attaching to, which is okay. You can see how they're just climbing out of the bed. But I had an idea this morning about a different approach to these containers, specifically this style container, and how I can potentially grow some cold crops in them. I don't know if I'm going to do that approach this year or more like next spring, but once I decide, we'll talk about kind of what the options were. I'm expecting the squash and okra to live here for the rest of the season, growing year I should say. We won't replant that area. Our container garden zone here, and then the small raised bed back here, these spaces will not be replanted for the fall. We'll leave them to finish their summer work. But I don't know if I mentioned, once we dig up all of the potatoes, that will be a fall space. The intention is to put spinach there, which I have you know, it seems like it should be an easy crop to grow, but I've had hit or miss luck with the spinach. Our corn, which is, some of it's rounding third, some of it is still at what seems like it's beginning. So this corn in its entirety, I think it's going to take me all of the rest of August, maybe even into September, but that's okay because I plan on using this space as my primary planting for kale and collards. Again, transplanting some plants that I have that are trucking along, super small now. And so that's the reason why I'm not transplanting them into the spaces in the backyard. I want them to get a little bit more size on them to help increase their chances of survival. So this is a good space for something like arugula. It did really well over here in that same style raised bed, and because arugula again is subject to the cabbage butterfly, it almost feels like what isn't, I could still cover this with a small piece of netting, and so that's my thinking. I also may come in with some direct sown lettuce. That's something I can just use this existing netting for, so I have a couple of days to figure that bit out. These are our potatoes, and so I want to show you one other space, and then we're going to get to digging up this center space for potatoes. And it actually, I was mistaken. I thought this greenery was still from this set of potatoes, but it's actually from this one. We'll also pull some of these weeds, which have been rampant. We'll come in and do a weeding. We're letting our potatoes completely die back. And once we get in here, you'll see what I mean about this center space. This is the red skin potato. These are Yukon Golds, and this is russets. And so we'll clean up this space and probably add some mulch to it. And we're leaving the Yukon Golds because they're still, from what I can tell, some greenery there. And the same for the russets, but for the russets, they're also a longer day variety. Just a quick update, I came in and, believe it or not, transplanted cucumbers last night, right? Never planted cucumber plants this late. I already have some producing, but I had started these indoors, moved them outside. They've been outside for weeks. And let's see, look, I started these on 6/22. I mean, it's 2 months ago almost. And so cucumbers, some say don't like to be transplanted. I've transplanted them over the years. Never this big, this size. All right, let's dig some potatoes. We're expecting potatoes to be near where the stem of the potato plant came from. And sure enough, as I'm looking closer at the potatoes to my left, the russets, some of those vines seem to be dying back, so we may be closer than I think for those. Also to note, look at how close they were to the soil line, which means they could have probably used a bit more of the mulch to cover them. We don't want them to be exposed to sun and turn green. Okay, all right. This is about the size I'm expecting for this variety. This is Red Norland. You can of course use gloves for this, but I like to be able to feel the potatoes. It's easier for me to do when I'm barehanded. And the soil isn't bone dry. It does have a little bit of moisture, but it's actually perfect for digging potatoes, not really damp either. So the reason why I want to let, and when people say things like let the potato plants die back, is they are more prime for storage potatoes. And so depending on what we end up getting out of the harvest will determine how many I intend on storing versus, keeping long enough to eat fresh. The intention would be to let these cure where the skin gets a little bit more tough, which will aid in them storing a little bit longer. So as a quick interlude, it's hard to tell. So this is either one plant or we could be breaching the second plant. So I'm going to go ahead and dig up this row, if you will, and and we'll see how many we got across basically 3 plants. All right, be right back. Okie doke, so super pleased. This is one of 3 spaces. So the red Norlands were in the middle. We dug those up. Yukon Gold are what's still behind me, and then russets. And then in that grow bag I have Yukon Golds and 3 more plantings. 2 containers in the backyard, those black containers that I like. Again, Yukon Gold and Red Norland. And then I have some itty bitty small potatoes that I planted out and one of my green stalks in a few tiers. But yeah, I appreciate y'all spending some time with me. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to drop them below. And I look forward to seeing y'all in the next one. And I'm just trying to be careful because I've had such trouble. Trying to be careful not to drop my coffee cup. Ugh. All right, let's rinse off. All right, so I really would love to stop and make another cup of coffee, but the morning is getting warm. I still have some of that raspberry basil black tea, so I think that's what I'll grab a cup of.